Hello and welcome to the Posture Dojo podcast. My name is Sam Miller. I'll be your host on this postural transformation journey, sharing some stories from my own healing journey of an 85-degree kyphoscoliosis and speaking with experts from a variety of fields that help us build a holistic approach to how we can reverse compromised postures and build our best posture. Today, I'm excited to have Erin Tietz on the podcast, and she's tapped into a couple topics which I know from experience are very important for anyone considering the transformation of their body, their posture, and their optimal health. Words like fascia and flow and meridians and relieving pain and living our best life. So Erin, I'm looking forward to diving into it. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for I'm happy to be here and excited to talk with you about all of these things.
How do you describe what you do, and what do people usually come to work with you for?
I have been describing myself as a fascia investigator. And I've come to that more recently because my work has changed quite a bit over the years. I tend to work with people who have tried many other modalities such as physical therapy, chiropractic, acupuncture, and will get some relief, but not relief that stays with them or that's more permanent. And then they come into my treatment room, and we investigate through their fascia and its relationship to other systems in their body, such as their nervous system and their muscular system and their lymphatic system and more.
So we've gone into fascia a couple times, but not so much in terms of how the emotional connection of fascia. And I've seen you kind of connect those dots. How is the fascia connected to our emotions?
There's still a lot of research going on to describe what's happening. There's some really good information out there, but part of my experience with it is individual. It's dependent on the person I'm working with. My thoughts go back to when I'm working with someone and they walk into the room and I've never seen them before. I can almost look at their face and I have to make sure to let them know that this could be an emotional journey as well as a physical one. There's a sixth sense that I feel like I need to say that. And whenever I do, almost every time that person ends up crying on my table. And it's quite an experience for them and for myself. And a lot of times what comes out of it is that the work feels so different that they have hope where they had it before and lost it, and they have it again. And we start talking about it. One of the things that comes up is that in moments of trauma or stress or anxiety or even extreme happiness and surprise, any extreme type of emotion, the fascia acts to protect us. Sometimes it can restrict or contract when the rest of the body is not able to do that as a protection mode. And then it may stay there and not change. And when that happens, we need to help nurture the fascial system to evolve and to change and to reorient so that the muscles and the fascia and all the other systems, like I mentioned, have a better relationship with each other.
There's a big chance that your local physician has probably not studied the latest part of fascia as it is, right? It's really only been recently diagnosed as our largest organ in 2017, which kind of is, okay, how did that happen? But then also, what are the implications of understanding it? And I think everyone has a slightly different definition of fascia. So what is your definition of fascia?
If I were to be simplistic for those that are unaware of what fascia is in the body, it's connective tissue. Connective tissue is what connects everything to everything else at the same time. It also separates it. Fascia is incredible, and there's so much more coming out about it, but it has its own intelligence. It has its own electrical conductivity. We have our extracellular matrix. Our lymphatics live in our superficial fascia. The deep fascia and the visceral fascia that surrounds our organs is the foundation of our posture, of our movements, of our physiology. It's so integrated into every single system in our body that we're just starting to understand this. For so long, it was dismissed and taken away as packaging and looked at everything else, the muscles and the bones and the tendons. And now, as science has evolved and what we are learning about fascia is that it has so much of a influence in our entire body. So let's also think about it in ways that we can visualize it. If someone's preparing meat for dinner and they have a chicken breast, there are certain aspects of the chicken breast where if you pull one muscular area away from another, there's a fuzzy film or a silver skin. Those are all different descriptions of fascia that you can see, and that's also in your body. And another way to think about it, I love using the example of an orange. So the orange has the outer peel, and when you take that peel off, you see the pith and the pieces of the orange. You can tell that they are connected to one another, but you can easily take one slice away and it's separate from that rest of the orange. And that's what fascia does as well. And that's where it has this unique ability to not only connect everything to everything else, but also keep it separate. And when we start to have achy body, stiffness, feeling of constriction, sometimes that fascia, that separating the muscles adheses together and it becomes less pliable, less flexible, more sticky and stuck. Those are just some descriptions that I'll use to describe fascia, both so people can understand it and also think about it in terms of how it works inside the body.
Yeah, because it appears to be doing so much that we're having to draw in a few different analogies. Like it's almost scaffolding as well for this body, as you were saying, holding it together, and that membrane of an orange slice is a great kind of visualization of that. And then it also seems to kind of act as the extension of the nervous system. So we have that electrically impulsing kind of nervous system, which is, essentially our brain extending throughout our body. So the fascia is, just like the rest of our body, kind of an extension of our brain. And so you mentioned that we can get imprinted with these, or we can have these very deep traumatic reactions that may get stuck in the body. Walk us through kind of the process of that.
I'm trying to think of an example that would be useful. If someone's in a car accident, there's a couple different aspects of trauma in that moment, both physical and mental and emotional. The fear, the feeling of being in that moment, and the process of healing after, both physically and emotionally. When you're in that trauma, the nervous system gets so heightened, and the fascia then also has that response. Like you said, they are so very much connected. And you can be in that fight or flight where you're always on, like I'm always going, and you can't regulate back to the point where the parasympathetic takes over and causes your body to heal, rest, and digest. And when those moments of trauma happens, the nervous system, the fascia, are like, okay, I got you. We're gonna get you through this moment. And then in time, as you come out of it, whereas the nervous system at some point will start to find some more regulation, the fascia may not. And that's where you can find these moments where there's opportunity for improvement in the relationship between the nervous system and the fascia. I ended up just writing a course for the platform dailyohm.com. And my most recent course was called The Parasympathetic Nervous System Fix. And in that course, what I teach is through mindful movement and functional movement and unique cueing, a way for you to move the body in order to come back to a parasympathetic state. So I'm using the ideas of fascia and the practice of fascia conditioning in order to teach the body and train the body to toggle between a sympathetic state and a parasympathetic state.
So there's this traumatic event that kind of dysregulates the our system, and it's in this traumatic state that we can, if we're not purposefully or intentionally bringing it back into that calm, regulated state, that's where some of these maybe more chronic issues can happen. And I assume, or I propose that it's also these emotional states that we may have, especially during childhood when we're much more susceptible to the programs that we're going to carry for as our kind of default programming for a lot of our lives. It may also become imprinted in those cases where we're dealing with chronic traumatic emotions that may be challenging to understand and comprehend. And so we get into this dysregulation of an emotional connection. It might be whether it's argument or anxiety, or if it's abuse or neglect, they could all kind of imprint a kind of a dysregulated emotional and therefore nervous system state and capture a lot of people in that throughout their lives. So what I'm motivated, or what I'm like encouraged about right now, is that people are really awakening to this type of healing. Even 5 years ago, I didn't kind of see as much attention being paid to some of these emotional release techniques, these nervous system regulation techniques, and as well as fascia. Because these things aren't really ideas that have been given to us by the conventional medical system.
That's so true. When we're talking about trauma and the nervous system and fascia, my mind keeps going back to different experiences I've had with it, and why, when I worked on this course, I went with a fascia approach is because you had said it already. Fascia is a sensory organ. So, what does that mean? Our proprioception lives in our fascia. So does our interoception, which is a concept of being able to mindfully sense the actual feelings and sensations that are happening within your body. For example, if you contract your right quad and you feel your glutes turn on, you're like, oh, I feel that. That's interoception, and you're in your body, or you're aware and you're feeling it. And that's what fascia has to offer when it comes to nervous system regulation, is it brings you back into yourself again, where sometimes when we're in trauma or we're going through a high stress situation, we almost can't find ourselves. We feel disconnected from our bodies. And because fascia is our sensation, when you can find different ways to touch, to address the fascia in the body, to talk to different areas that are adhesed, or to muscles that aren't working as well and turning them back on, it's just as important to do that as it is to, quote, fascia stretch. But that moment of time that you're committing to yourself brings you back to yourself, and that brings you into embodiment. And that, to me, is where we start to be able to find that parasympathetic state and where we can begin to heal.
One of the big reasons why it may not have been in our current kind of modern conventional medical system is, for them, it's a lot of it's about guaranteeing results. And so methodologies and techniques that require work, like working out, doing things, doing hard things, are less likely to get the results because people don't do it. Most people don't do it unless they really need to. Their body's like really caving in. They find that will to really change their habits and start on this new journey. But that's oftentimes why their solutions are usually pills or surgeries, because they can control that. They can
Right.
ensure that that's being delivered. So walk us through what does it mean to integrate these things that we're talking about into actually seeing the benefits of it?
When I first start working with someone, I want to let them know that the work is very different. It is not a traditional modality that you would see out there. It's not myofascial massage. It's not stretching at all. It's quite opposite of stretching. And as people start to step into it, what I find kind of gives them the hook that keeps them continuing on their journey is that the movement feels craveable in their body. So if you think about someone who really loves sugar or salt, that it's so hard to stop because
Yeah.
the biology is like more and more. I often get messages from people all over the world saying, I can't, I crave it. To them, it feels, and to myself as well, a cross or a combination of a workout and a massage from the inside out. So, in terms of this modality, it's so different for every single person because each person has their own unique fascial system because of their experiences, prior injuries, surgeries, traumas, Posture is so huge in the work that I do. And of course, we can talk more about that because it plays a role as the initial foundation that I start with every single person, both virtually or in person, and even in my online courses. But thinking about moving the body different, people are so used to being told the same things. Here's a stretching class to get you going in the morning, or here's a program for plantar fasciitis. And they see a lot of the same, at number one, exercises, and they see a lot of the same stretches. And when I first went into trying to put this work out there, I was very adamant about having fascia be talked about in my titles for everything to differentiate it from the traditional programs that were out there. So essentially, basically, the work's being different than stretching is fascia needs tension and compression to change, and it needs movement. I use a shortened state of muscle positioning under contraction and then maintain contraction through elongation. There are some aspects that are somewhat similar to a modality you see in physical therapy, but there is a lot that's different about it at the same time. But that's just a little bit of information about the work and how this modality is unique compared to different things that people might try in a traditional Western approach, or even going the chiropractic route too.
Yeah, so that reminds me of a yawn or other types of pandiculation where you get that contraction and that elongation through the contraction. And that's nice. That feels nice. That's that craveability of the movement. Is there something that you would suggest someone could start just implementing this just so they get a taste of what this would feel like in their daily life?
Yeah, what could I offer for an example? I know we're doing a little video here
Yes.
too, so I could definitely demonstrate, but I can talk through what people could do even if they're not watching. For example, one area that people struggle a lot with are the traps, usually more on one side than the other, the traps between the neck and the shoulder. And they reach back there and they grab it, and sometimes there's a knot in there or a trigger point in there. And so you see people all the time rubbing their kind of shoulders. So instead of doing the traditional stretch where someone would maybe sit on their hand and then tilt their head in the opposite direction and look down, instead I would target the area or the trap by shortening it. And so to do that, you would take one hand, let's just say our left hand, and cross it over the right shoulder. So as you do that, then you want to lift your elbow up to shorten the trap. Once that elbow is lifted and the trap is shortened, then we need to add compression and tension to it. So you take your other hand from underneath and grab the elbow with your fingertips on top. So now you've just created a closed chain situation. So now the nervous system and the fascial muscular system are all working together in unison. So once your hand is there, you press your elbow up until you feel the trap contract, and you wait about 3 seconds so the nervous system has time to reach the area that you're targeting. Once you have it, let's say you're at about a level 5 out of 10 for the amount of muscle contraction you have, you want to ease off to about a level 2 and then let the hand overpower the resistance and guide the elbow down as it continuously resists up. And then you stop either if you hit the end of the range where the muscle stops contracting or you hit a wall, then fully relax and bring that elbow up again. And almost every time that elbow will go higher because there's instant change in the fascia. So that's basically what I call the fascia equation. Shorten the area or target muscle. I say area because it's never one muscle there. Add contraction to the shortened muscle against resistance. Keep resisting as you move in the opposite direction. Now, a couple things I look for when I'm doing the work: does the muscle bounce? Does it shake? Do you get referred symptoms down the arm, up the neck? Is your jaw tightening? So I start to look at all of the different responses that someone would have in that scenario. And we slowly nurture by keep repeating the same thing until the fascia changes enough that the pain subsides, or as I'm trying to go through this, that the nervous system does a better job talking to that muscle and the fascia in that area. So that's kind of the basic equation that I use, amongst some other techniques. Like I use my feet on people. I do some walking techniques as well. But there's always tension, compression, and movement. That's the magic sweet spot when it comes to fascia.
You mentioned it does a better job of talking to that area of the body. And that's what so much of, at least with what I'm doing in the postural correction space, is about reestablishing that communication between the mind and the muscle that we want to activate as we're restoring and kind of reactivating our highest potential posture. So what are so when it comes to posture for you, what types of postures are you most commonly coming in front of these days?
Oh my God, I could talk for probably hours just on this one question. Oh gosh, postures. I've never seen anyone's posture that someone would say is perfect. I don't believe that there is such a thing as perfect posture. I believe that there's room for improvement, awareness, and education when it comes to each person's individual posture. And that might include discovering that they have a pelvic rotation, that they have a rib cage rotation in combination with the pelvis, or maybe they're opposing each other. I look for fascial spirals in the limbs. So if the humeral head is rotating the arm in and stuck there and not able to fully externally rotate, that goes for the femur as well, and then even through the feet. So when someone comes in, I'll usually take a photograph of them standing and I ask them, don't try to be in your corrected posture or improved posture. Just be in your posture with your feet hip width apart, as if you're walking down the road and you bump into someone that you've never seen before. And you're taken by surprise, so you're not thinking through all the things like, oh, chin tuck, shoulders back, and all whatever things you're working on. And that gives me a really good snapshot. And my client that we'll look at together, and I'll take a picture from the side and from the back. And I always look at muscle tone and wonderful things I see about their posture to know that I see the effort that you're already doing. But let's dive a little bit deeper now. And a lot of times that's where my work will begin. And I almost always see a pelvic rotation, more rotation than a tilt or a lift, but that's often present too. And then we start talking about patterns. So a right pelvic rotation is something I see a lot of. And I have a hypothesis as to why. And fascia responds to the demands on the body. So if you repeat a pattern all the time, every day, your fascia will support you in that pattern. For instance, we go to the bathroom every day. And if you're right hand dominant, which way do you turn to wipe? To the right. And if you ideally go to the bathroom every day, you are turning in that same pattern every day, all day, your whole life. So if you try to rotate the other way with the left hand, it feels awkward. It feels weird. It feels unnatural. And those type of patterns I see play out in people's posture. And I feel like that is a big contributor to where we start to break down in the body. Just as with scoliosis, you're missing some of the foundational elements of the posture that then lead to increased risk of injury or wear and tear in the joints. Same thing goes with just general posture and patterns. So I would look at someone's posture, we would do an assessment, and then we begin into the work where I would try to identify or draw out awareness of certain fascial areas that might be adhesed or built up scar tissue that might be problematic in that person's ability to even feel or sense their body because it's blocking the nervous system. And then build from there. Let's find some muscles that aren't working well enough and turn those muscles on. Usually one glute is more active than the other, or one QL is it's taut and it's dense and the other one isn't showing up as much. And so then we start, that's why I call myself the fascia investigator, because I don't know what I'm going to find in that person's body. Even if I see a pattern that I'm familiar with, what I discover is not always the same. And that's why I feel so strongly about posture as such a huge part of the conversation in overall healing, because those nuances aren't often seen in a reel or in a story or even in some videos on YouTube. We're taught different ways. Fix your posture by doing this, or fix your sleep posture. That's another big one I talk about, by doing this. But what about you have two people who are exactly the same height, weight, size, but one person is right hand dominant and they have a pelvic rotation to the right and the other one has a left. That advice doesn't work well for both of them, in my opinion anyway.
There's so much beauty to the human structure. It's so delicate, but also so powerful at the same time. And in its optimal state, I see flow. And when we have these compromises, which is just the word, like a very blanket word, that it might be that emotional traumatic imprint, it might be that injury that in the ankle that set an imbalance, like through a dysregulated rehabilitation earlier on that triggered a curvier scoliosis higher up. There's so many different ways it can happen, but just these slightest kinks and imbalances in our chain can set us on a pattern for a very long time. And that can develop, if we're not aware of it at that time, these root issues can be really deep down. And it does take that investigation that you're talking about to figure it out. And not only is it the original kink or that original compromise, it's the compensations that form to keep it all together
100%.
despite the compromise. And that alone is an entire journey. And I know when I realized that I needed to take my posture much more seriously than I was taking it about 6 years ago, when my curve had tightened my hips and so much that I was compressed from the inside out. My entire systematic flow was being choked from the inside out because of that compression. I realized that I needed to take it more seriously. And the work was, yes, I had a wedge-shaped T10 causing an 85-degree curve, and that's at least closer to the root issue than my tight hips. My healing for many years was focusing on unlocking the hips and the psoas and the hip flexors. So it's the healing process was, in the words that we're talking about, was undoing these compensations and restoring healthy communication to the areas that would foster a healthier posture, which is just like words
Oh my
that aren't really said as much, that should be said when it
God, right.
comes to, at least when you're dealing with a compromised and compensated posture.
It's so interesting how you describe it. And it is, and you said it takes years to release the hip flexors. And so I think about people who come to see me that have been through different modalities with the effort of trying to do one thing. And it's usually the thing that they feel the most. Like, I just feel so tight, my hip flexors, or my hamstrings are so tight. What I end up doing, which comes out in my cues inevitably, is that we have to look up the chain. Let me use an example. If I'm having someone do a piriformis activation, not a fascia stretch, or I'm sorry, not a traditional stretch, but a fascia version of it, the fascia way, I would shorten the piriformis, add contraction and movement in the opposite direction. But let's say that person's doing that and they have all their cues that they've been working on for their whole life. I know I need to strengthen this glute or stretch this or stretch that. But as I'm watching them, I have eagle eyes on them. I'm like, they're not coming from the right place. The sequencing of muscle contractions not quite there. So I tell them, let's look up the chain. So we're working on your left piriformis, but your right rib cage or even the right mid body, where they might have a collapse due to scoliosis, isn't integrated. And so I stopped them. I said, we have to reevaluate this. And I'll go up the chain and I'll say, okay, I want you to imagine. And at this point, I've probably identified their kind of weaker side in terms of their rotation or scoliosis. I say, I want you to imagine a steel bracket from the midline of your body, wrapping around one side, whatever side it is for them, if they have an S-shaped, depending on which side they have an S-shaped curve, to the spine. So it's like this steel bracket that goes from the front to the back. And I want you to fill up that space. And that's kind of, I think, somewhat similar to Schroth technique in some aspects. And once we do that, then they start to think about their transversus abdominis, which I'm happy to talk more about because I think that's a huge, massive element when it comes to posture, on that one side more than the other. And then once they have it, we go back to the piriformis on the left side. We execute it again, and almost always it is different. And the work is more focused in the appropriate area and it's executed better because they gave themselves the proper support higher up the chain outside of the area that we were targeting. Does that sort of make sense or come across in my description?
So you were actually kind of getting them familiar with the healthy communication, and then you're encouraging them to breathe and build that communication into the area that may have been collapsed or not as activated.
Yep, that's definitely part of it. Prior to me working with their performance, I probably would have already taught them about the transversus abdominis. I call it the magic muscle or the master connector. And briefly, it starts in the lumbar spine in the thoracolumbar fascia, and it wraps around like a corset. And it has a direct relationship with the diaphragm and the pelvic floor. So the pelvis, the spine, and the rib cage are intimately connected through this transversus abdominis or TA. So when I'm watching someone execute movement or doing a fascia stretch on them, I'm looking to see if we're not getting full engagement of the TA for proper spinal support. 95% of the TA's job is to stabilize the spine, which is humongous. And so if that's not fully functioning, we're also working from a broken foundation. So when I think about that steel bracket, I almost let it be somewhat up to them with the foundation of education we've already had. But when I say fill up, that includes breath and it includes TA engagement. It can include obliques. It can include multifidus in the back or QL. So it's really that person's efforts trying to find deep within their body an area that's there but isn't showing up as well as it can, and try to bring that out as part of their movement foundation.
100%. So you did mention a technique which is very similar to the Schroth breathing technique, that rotational angular breathing, understanding how scoliosis is a derotation of the spinal column and therefore the rib cage. And by targeting, intentioning your breath and expansion into the collapsed area that happens from that. As you get that rotation, you get a kind of a collapsing and compression on one side. So by intentioning with your visualization, with your mind, using your nostril on that side can help. Using tactile touching of that area can help. You target the inflation in your body into that area, and then create that kind of that reestablishing of the rib cage. You basically use your breath to derotate your rib cage. So and it's hard because the breath goes through the path of least resistance in our body. And like you've said, we've just been breathing that way or moving that way for so long. Our muscles have been activating that way for so long. It feels foreign. It feels like, what this is, I've never done this before. And we might start feeling restriction, and we feel that stickiness of that fascia where we just can't. It's like it feels like it should be moving, but it's not. And it feels like restriction. It feels tight. It feels like resistance. But with focus, some know-how, some help, some understanding of that, some patience, some relaxation, right? By exhaling, slowing down the breath, we can instruct every cell in our body. That mean ultimately this, when somebody has somebody like yourself to expertly kind of guide them into the exact location that they're going for, that's a huge advantage. But it's also up to each person to kind of send those instructions through their system. And so the better they can imagine
Yeah.
that, the more vividly they can imagine that. And sometimes that does help by looking at those anatomical pictures, just what that muscle looks like, know what that movement looks like in that muscle. Then that'll help you kind of become your own healer.
Yeah, there is a difference between working with someone who really wants to feel better and they are interested in the work and in finding new ways to heal and to improve, to set their self up to age well. And then there's some people that I come in contact with that they're very disconnected from their body, but they want more, but they're not as interested in all of the aspects in which we're talking, these like the tactile cues, the visualization, and they all play such a big role in this. And once that comes into play, I find people then excel and they really move farther, faster in their healing journey because they have this new embodiment, like we talked about, this new awareness that they sense and they feel, and it's exciting and hopeful. And it's really fun to work at that point with people because the sky's the limit. And half the times when we're in session, I'm just making stuff up as I go, even with them. And we've been together for a while, and then we're like, oh, let's do this. And there's this feedback play that's happening between each person. And I always wish, I wish I was recording this whole thing because so many incredible things just came out of this session. And that's what's so fun about it. And Fascia gives us that opportunity because of what we're feeling inside. We can learn so much, those different breathing techniques, and realizing I can put the breath in a different place of my body, and I didn't think I could, or I didn't know I wasn't even doing that. And that alone is one step closer to that person's goals. And that fascia evolution in that process, to me, as an entire system, is incredible, because I believe that as none of us have perfect posture, we have imbalances, we have tilts, shifts, rotations. Can they all be improved 100%? How great would that be? But I don't think so.
And
but if our
what are
fascia
you
system
improving
is
for?
really healthy, yeah, and decrease risk of injury, decrease pain, more embodiment, better execution of move, so many things, right? Like chronic pain is really a difficult thing to live with, and my heart just goes out to people who are in that chronic pain scenario, and it's my quest to be able to help them in order to have some tools that they might not have tried yet to feel better. And in doing that, fascia as a system improves. And let's think of it like you have two balls. You have a bouncy ball that's super soft and bouncy and it's really flexible. And then you have another one that's like a hard plastic ball. And when you bounce that one, it kind of clinks and it doesn't really bounce. We want to live in a bouncy ball in our fascia, because if we do, then those imbalances, those structural changes might not even be felt if the fascia is doing a really good job of supporting us as our infrastructure and scaffolding, but at the same time having that flexibility and ability to live within these asymmetries.
That bounciness in your body when you're walking, that might look like joy, right? Feeling lighter in your body, that might feel like love. The Egyptian perspective of to enter the afterlife, your heart is weighed against a feather. And if it's equal to or lighter than a feather, then you go on, right? So you live lightly in your heart and therefore your mind and your body. All of these kind of eternal truths are kind of hinting at people and giving them the truth. But I feel like 80% or the vast majority of people don't want to do the work to heal. They want to feel better and go back to doing exactly what they're already doing. Do you ever get that feeling?
Yeah. I do feel that sometimes, and it kind of makes my heart hurt a little bit because I feel like it would be really hard for them to get to a point where they have that freedom and that lightness in their body. Even though I know the potential is there, I lived it myself. I think much like you and your quest to get the word out there about all this information, I was someone who was healed by the work that I teach in a very profound and very fast way. But then I continued my journey and realized that there was other healing that was to be done too, and that took more time. And because I'd had that bigger healing moment, I was invested. I'm like, here we go. It was this moment where I knew what I'd be doing the rest of my life. And there's so much emotional overwhelm in such a good way, an overflowing of emotion that was present with that physical change in my body. And I really want that for people. And I know it's possible for people. The work I teach can be done in person with me, but it also can be done on your own, which is what I think is so unique about this practice. And maybe in time, more medical professionals will have this information and tools to have it be part of the advice that's given for people when they are seeking healing and wanting to feel better in their bodies.
We're seeing a lot of old systems crumble before our eyes. And we're also seeing a lot of people awaken to these new things. So I think we're moving in the right direction. And I think it's people like you who are there waiting from that at that doorway from the 80% to the 20% who are ready to say, okay, let's realize our like our relationship with our own bodies. Let's improve that relationship. We don't need to go to somebody else to fix. Like we can, it's like we can like benefit from that help, but ultimately they're helping us in our own relationship with our body. And if our lifestyle and the way we're thinking is creating patterns and charging our nervous system in certain ways throughout the day, when we go and go to a yoga class and but continue to think and move and hold ourselves in the same way, we're kind of swimming upstream. It feels like when you're kind of like approaching things at a very physical level or external level, and then not diving a little deeper into the internal stream that's going on.
It's so incredible. Like I felt for a long time I was just kind of moving through life well enough, and I was able to still do stuff and physically, and but I started working very closely with people who live with multiple sclerosis, and that changed everything for me. And that started happening before I got into the fascia work that I teach now. And I worked with people whose nervous system were failing them, and their nervous system wasn't talking to their body the way it had, and it was progressing. And in looking at that scenario, I feel like I had the biggest education I could have ever had, because I could see improvements, I could see change, I could see progression, I could see people doing things that they thought they'd lost forever, and they're able to do them again. And that taught me that's true for everyone. It really, truly is. And I've seen it time and time again. And when that happens, it's the most beautiful thing to see. And I'm so grateful to be able to work with people to be a part of their journey to get there for themselves, because it ultimately does end up their motivation for finding me or a program or walking through my door. And so to be able to give some of those tools back is really, I'm really grateful for it. Very much. I'm grateful that I had my own challenges in my own body to bring me to the point where I can talk about this work now.
I'd like to kind of dive into the what you said about enough. You're living well enough, and that's something that as well was the biggest thing that I had to overcome to truly kind of go from that I can live with it to I'm going to do something about it and do the work, because it is work. It is showing up. It's doing it. It's prioritizing it. It's if you don't prioritize it, it doesn't happen, because you can get by. You can live in this complacency. And to me, that redefined kind of my biggest risk that I see for most other people, which is complacency. Like we can get away with so much. We can eat all these different things and drink different things, and we can tolerate a large amount of things that aren't great for us in the long term, but we can kind of get away with it for quite a long time sometimes, or sometimes we can just smother the symptoms and just be well enough and get by. So that complacency of, yeah, I can do what I need to do. It's not worth me doing the work. What did it
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I guess most people need that kick in the butt. This is over if you don't do something about it, which it was for me, dealing with 8 months of chronic fatigue, just a complete choking of the system. Immune system was shutting down, digestive system shutting down. It was all shutting down. And for 8 months, I searched and searched until I was like, oh, I need to just unravel myself and start from there. And then that kind of took me on the journey. So what was it for you? What helped you go from well enough to I'm going to do something about this?
Honestly, it was 10 minutes. It wasn't a progression where I slowly realized I have to do something about this, because I had been doing something about it for years, decades. So my story begins, my
Yeah,
personal story. I have my right tibia is longer than my left. To the naked eye, no one would ever see it. So I grew up as a dancer, and no teacher would notice it because they weren't trained to look at that and it wasn't obvious. As I continued to dance, I would push my body past the point of its potential. And I started to break away some of the muscular tendinous attachments to the bone. For example, my right hamstring. I started pulling my right hamstring over and over again in 8th grade. And I repeated the injury over and over again. I'm like, why is it always my right hamstring? And it took about 10 more years to figure that out. But in my early 20s, I realized that my right leg was longer than my left. And so I developed what I call developmental scoliosis. I wasn't born with scoliosis. It didn't emerge in my teens. It slowly developed because of my leg length discrepancy. And at the time I was working at a major hospital in New York, and I worked with all these amazing physical therapists, probably some of the best in the city. And I'd be like, oh, who wants to work on me today? And so would work on me, and we do this modality and that modality. So I did everything from iontophoresis, massage, acupuncture, chiropractic, Novocaine injections, cortisone injections. I worked with a pain management doctor. I did the MRI, and it showed just tons of scar tissue built up on my right ischial tuberosity, or my butt bone. And he said to me, Erin, you have tried everything. I can't give you any more advice. I don't know what else you can do. You have scar tissue, so good luck. And basically said to stop. And to me, I was devastated because I had been trying for so hard for so long. And then I didn't honor it as much as I should because, like I said, I worked with people with MS. And so they were working so hard to feel better in their bodies. I didn't honor my own pain. And I gave up. I truly gave up. And it took my soul away. It took who I was, my personality. And I stopped doing the things I love to do, which I know many out there can relate to that story if you live with chronic pain. And it was devastating. So that's where I said I was getting by well enough. Until I came upon this work, I went for my first day of training. I went with the intention to learn something different, to find a new way to work with my current clientele at the time. I didn't go having any anticipation that I would be healed in this work because I had tried everything. And halfway through the first day, the instructor and a couple other people worked on me. And it was about 10 minutes worth of time. And it blew my mind, number one, because the person never touched my scar tissue. Every other modality was trying to break up the scar tissue, put a needle in the scar tissue, and nothing benefited. I didn't benefit from it. Nothing changed. The scar tissue didn't change. And this work, I shortened my hamstring. I contracted down my heel into her hand to create the connection to where the scar tissue was, the attachment, the tendinous attachment on my butt bone. Maintaining that contraction, we started to bring the foot up. I didn't, they did. And every rep was like dried, I always use this description, and it's not the best, but it felt like dried hard duct tape being ripped off my bone in the most beautiful, wonderful way that I wished someone could go in and push a button and make it all dissolve. And that's what it felt like. And I was crying. It was this emotional thing. Everyone's, are you okay? Because I was 5.5 months pregnant at the time. And I'm like, keep going. And I got up and I bent over and touched my toes. And I had no pain. It was gone. The pain that I had every day was gone. I felt my hamstring stretch and I felt it shorten. I think the muscle shortening is just as important as them lengthening. And it's a huge piece of the puzzle that isn't talked about. And for me, I felt it. And the relief was in the muscle shortening. And I walked around for an hour and I cried like a baby because I knew my whole life had changed. So that was an immediate moment. It took 10 minutes and I knew deep in my soul that everything had changed. So that happened. And then my story continued. Then the continued healing, the systemic healing followed that moment. And that's still going on. And that's still an evolution. And I'm still noticing postural patterns and repeated movements that I'm countering, I'm unraveling. So the story continues, but my foundation has completely renewed in a way that my personality, I feel like that's come back. I feel like I have a really great relationship with my body again. And I'm so grateful for having experienced all of that because now I know it to be true because it's happened to me in a way that I know how to kind of take steps forward myself and work with people in their journeys towards feeling better too.
So it was feeling it to believe it.
100% for me. I had given up. I was told by an amazing doctor, you're at the end of the road. You literally have tried everything. That he knew what to offer me. And even in my search for something else, I was exhausted, completely exhausted from trying. That I gave up. And it took this total surprise moment to reawaken me and to bring me hope again, and then continue my journey from there.
And ultimately restore optimal energetic flow in the body, right? To regain your life force. It sounds
Absolutely. That's exactly what happened. I started saying yes to things again. My friends would want to go to do a yoga class and then brunch after. And I used to always say, I'll meet you for brunch after. Even though I was a dancer, I grew up moving my body. I didn't want to do it because stretching hurt me more than anything. So I would skip that part of it, and then I'd meet them after. And then I started saying yes again.
how do you integrate flow into your life now?
How do I integrate flow? Partly through the work that I teach, because I actively do the work when I'm teaching online classes. I just taught a class this morning on leg strengthening and fascia conditioning, and I combined what we know as traditional strength training with fascia work. So I'd prepare the fascia before, and then I'd do some fascia work after, and we talk about what that felt like in the body compared to having not done that before. And to me, that feels like a flow, because the mindset is connected to the body and the movements, and they're one. And that feels to me that the energy can flow through the body better, both emotionally, mentally, and physically. That's one
And
way. And then another way is, oh, go ahead.
and
Sorry.
how do you integrate dance?
Oh my gosh. Sometimes when I'm playing, I really encourage people to do non-guided play with their body. So that would be after working on a couple clients, I'll sit down for 10 minutes, but I'll have music going. And then I'll let the music help me decide what to do for movement in my body. Oftentimes I'm contracting with movement, pushing my feet into the floor as I move, different things like that. So it's less curated. And I'll also go to a dance class with my friends and dance, going into it thinking, oh, I'm going to suffer for this tomorrow. I don't do this regularly enough. And almost always, I'm very pleased with how my body is able to take on the challenge. And I usually feel pretty good after. So I'm always very happy.
The same way we have a lot of truths kind of passed down to us in stories, I believe a lot of truth is passed down through dance. And ultimately, when we chant and we have these different type of cultural dancing traditions, I feel like embedded in them, there's a lot of healthy movements. I've spent a lot of time in Latin America, and even that reggaeton, like moving the hips, is something that we don't have in my Australian culture. And that was also part of my healing process, because restoring a lot of that flow was through those type of dancing. Because yeah, this communication, I just feel like dancing is a great way to restore that communication.
It's so funny you say that. Just this morning with one of my members, we were talking. He intuitively, he's been on the journey with me for about a year now, started talking to me about dance, and that he's been standing on his feet and pushing to the ground and moving his hips. It just started coming out of him. And I think that's just so incredible. And I said, I actually have a series of yoga movements to music and dance. So it's a more of a rhythmic type of yoga with fascia cueing in it that I did with one of my best friends. I'm like, maybe I need to bring that back out. And we didn't have great audio, so I didn't publish it yet. But maybe I should just put it out there, because I think it's such an amazing combination. And I keep going back to Gil Headley. Have you heard of Gil Headley
No.
before? Oh my gosh, I just adore this man. He's an anatomist, and he's done so many he's done so many cadaver dissections, and he's very comical, and he's very easy to listen to, but he offers so much education when it comes to the body and anatomy. But I was listening to a workshop with him, and someone asked him directly, what is the best thing that you can do for your fascia? And he goes, dance.
Nice.
Number one, dance.
Yeah.
because it's undirectional. It's not a curated like a bicep curl up and down. You have all the different parts of your body moving together as one, just as fascia is one system and it's everywhere. So it's amazing that you have that same feeling and experience in your healing journey. And dance was such a big part of it. And that makes sense to me why.
Yeah, and life is a dance. If you were to fast forward your lifetime and kind of think about how your body is moving in that, how robotic is it going to be, and how all terrain and how much dance is it going to have? I think the more the better for me. I think flow is life and flow is medicine, and dance is part of that. And finding a constantly challenging terrain to overcome, like whether that's walking the neighborhood or hiking a mountain, always be looking for that next challenge to kind of form your body, because our environment does form our body, internal and out. So what's your, I guess we'll, before we go, what's your favorite song to dance? What song would you recommend? What instructions would you say, hey, put
Oh,
on this song
God.
and head into a direction of flow and fascial connection?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. I go to my favorite music, stuff that makes me feel happy and fun inside, versus maybe a very rhythmic kind of yogi
Right.
flow. Like I put on Simon and Garfunkel. I put on Bette Midler is my favorite. I adore her because she's just has so many different aspects to her. Um, but I'm trying to think of a specific song. Sometimes if I want to feel like I'm in the flow and I'm moving more gracefully, I put on The Rose by Bette Midler. And that song has a lot of significance for a lot of reasons in my life. And it brings me back to memories and to different emotions. And it's a whole evolution in that one song from different feelings and then physical movement as well. So I would say The Rose by Bette Midler.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I guess you did mention yeah, I also like those yogi flows, but as we mentioned before, that bounce is that joy, and that's a key part of this. So as you go into these healing environments, sometimes you get this very serious, sacred tone, which is important to have that sacred space, but sometimes it can be too serious and too, I'm not sure of the word, but the goal of the body is to have that bounce, that joyful bounce. Sometimes you got to take it seriously, but don't forget that joyful bounce.
Yeah. Fascia loves bouncing too, big time.
Yes. So,
Yes,
Erin,
that's so good.
what are your current ways that you can help people, and where can they find you? We'll make sure to include any links in the description.
Wonderful. Yeah. So let's see. I have a website. It's dailyfascia.com. And a lot of my resources are there. You can find me directly there. People set up virtual appointments or in person where they come to see me. And I also have online programs. So I have like an introduction to the work on my website. It's the 5-day fascia fix, and then some longer form classes. I have one that's focused just on the neck. Not with the neck is the main area of focus for people that have headaches and neck pain. And then also one on the TA, the transversus abdominis. Those are all on my website. I have a membership on Patreon, which is my direct community. I just love my community there. It's just as someone would have a membership on their website, this is where I hold my membership, where a lot of podcasters also have memberships as well. So that's a great place. All my curated content and all my exclusive stuff is all there. And it's everything from 2-minute videos, really quick things, to workshops, to challenges, to courses, and then 30-minute classes, 45-minute classes, all there. And then I have a bunch of courses on that platform, dailyom.com. So there's a bunch of them that live there as well. There's a lot of different options. YouTube, there's free content, Instagram, and all of that good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you for putting these ideas out there and investigating what needs to be investigated. I think you've brought together a few different modalities that need to be there, and it sounds like your kind of life experience has truly prepared you for where you are now, from your background in dance and the issues in your body that you've dealt with and are overcoming. It sounds like you're kind of bringing together all of that and transforming your greatest weakness into your greatest strength, which I think is the source of our greatest strength.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate it. again, happy to be in this space to hopefully contribute to other people's lives to help them heal and feel better too.
Alrighty. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.